by a person that's not an oil or minu, I have a contradiction. A Mishnah in Paro. The Mishnah says, they built these courtyards, these developments in Yerushalayim on top of rock, assuming and hopefully nobody's buried underneath. And as an extra precaution, they built it on arches in order that there would be no dead people, that their tumah would go all the way up, because if there's an empty, hollow area, then the tumah does not go straight up, it stops. Why they do this? Because of the suffix tumah, a kever of the deep, unknown tumah that might be underneath. They would bring women that were pregnant, the older sham, and they would give birth there, and they would raise their children there for the paraduma. And when the time came to get the water, you need to take spring water, natural spring water. How are you going to get it? They would bring oxen, and on top of the oxen there were doors. The kids would sit on top of them. And they had cups of stone in their hands, which cannot become tummy. Evan cannot become tummy. They got to the shiloach spring. They went. The animal pretty much went right up to the water. The kids jumped off the oxen. Why did they jump off? Because this Tana holds you have to take it by hand. So you have to take it by hand. This is what you got to do. So they jump off the oxen. They get the water. Milum, they fill up their cups. V'alu, they go back up. V'yashvu lahem, and they sit themselves back on the oxen. The reason why it says v'yashvu lahem is because no one's supposed to touch them. They sit themselves back on the oxen. That's the Tana Kamashita. Rabbi Yossi says, no, why would you take a chance? And I hold you don't even have to go in and get the water using your own hands. Rather, what you should do is stay on the door. From his place, means to lower down the cup. Fill it up because of the suffix tumah that's there. That is the machlokes in the Mishnah and Paro. Starting the Gemara now, the Gemara throws in a brisa with added information. Okay, Vitanya. This is going on this Mishnah and Paro. There's a brisa that says, Rabbi Yehuda says, is the Tana that we're dealing with, is Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda says on this Mishnah, Loi hayu meviin delases elo shvarim. Rabbi Yehuda says, no, don't bring doors. Don't bring doors, just bring oxen. Just bring oxen that are big, that have like a very wide body. You don't need the doors. Have the kids go on top of the oxen, and the oxen is an oil to stop from any tumah below, and they'll just travel on the oxen all the way to the water, and you do not need to have the doors. This is what Rabbi Yehuda says. He doesn't explain himself why. Why don't you have the doors for extra precaution? He just says, don't bring the doors. Just have the oxen, and that will be fine. That is all we see about Rabbi Yehuda. The problem is, if you lean over the oxen or a door, whichever one you have, you stick your hand off, potentially there's a dead body buried underneath, and you get nailed by a tumah. What? They had the cup, that sheet of holes that you lower down with the string, but at the end of the day, you want to stay as much as possible on the oxen and not go off. The doors give you more leverage, more like space, more width. If you're just on the oxen, they're wide, but they're not as big.
But if you put the apron over it, and you're supposed to sit there, right?
Right, so Yehuda says, just, you have the oxen, like you're saying, just stick.
I'm saying that why, if he's saying that?
He doesn't talk about the string or not the string. Could be hope the kids have to get off to actually fill it up with water. All he's saying is, you don't need the doors, just put them on oxen. The oxen will stop the tumah. That's what Yehuda says.
Tanakama's not worried about the kids getting off and going in the river.
So the Tanakama is stuck. He holds that you have to take it by hand. So we're going to do as best as possible and bring the oxen pretty much right up to the water. Could be the oxen even put their feet in the water, and then they get out. There's very little chance there's a dead body in water. Like no one buries, especially in a natural spring. It's not a man-made lake. So it's a natural spring. Whoever buried a body in a natural spring, it's possible. So the Tanakama says we're stuck. They have to get out, and they have to fill up their cups. Rabbi Yossi says, I'm a little bit concerned still, and I hold, you don't need to go out and fill it. To just lower it with a string and never leave the doors, never stick even your hand out the door. Like the second you stick your hand out, there's possible tumah underneath. So this is what Yehuda adds on from the brisa. So the Gemara says, now the Gemara ends off with its kasha. I v'hashvarim the oil she'ene osibide adamhu. What do you mean? Oxen are an oil that no person ever made, right? It's a natural tent. It's an animal's body. I mean, Hashem made it. No person went ahead and built an oil or made an oil. it's made by an animal without human intent. That's what we're talking about here. And still the Ketani, and still the Brisa says, Rabbi Yehuda says, Lo mevi'in delasis el shvarim. They would not bring doors, rather they would just bring the oxen. Take it back. We're trying to ask a question of Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda's opinion seems to be from the Mishnah in Ahalais, that an oil, in order to be an oil, has to be made with intent, with human intent, in order to be an oil. If not, if it's just naturally made or randomly made, it's not an oil. So we just learned a Mishnah in Para, and Rabbi Yehuda seems to be saying, you don't even need doors. The oxen themselves should be able to stop the tumah because the ox is an oil. Right? If you're on top of the ox, it's an oil, so you're protected if you're on top. I understand. It's not made by a person. So seems to be a contradiction in Rabbi Yehuda. This is a contradiction in Rabbi Yehuda. Do tents have to be made with human intent, or could it be naturally made? Seems from this shore, it's just natural. The guy didn't do anything, and you're protected when you're on top. An oil, if something's an oil, you're protected if you're on top. It also is an oil if you're underneath. If there's any dead person there, it's going to bring it there. Whatever is an oil for every halacha. So it sounds to be like it's a stira.
This means to say that Tanakama and Risi both hold that the shark is non-oil.
The Tanakama also holds the shore as oil, but he just wants like extra width. He's scared the kids are going to like stick their hand out. He just wants that you put an ox and you have extra width with it, putting it on the door. We know there's a good chance a kid's not going to stick his hand past the door. But Rabbi Yehuda says, no, even the ox himself is okay. The ox itself is okay. How's the ox an oil? It was never built by a person with human intent. So therefore the tumah should go right through the animal and nail the kids. And you should become tumah.
Aren't they doing this just to prove to the Stukim?
They are doing it. They're trying to prove to the Tzdukin. No, to prove to the Tzdukin, we're metama the kain on purpose. But because people, even Jewish people, are going to be mizalz, a regular yiddiya, you're like, the whole thing's a joke. We took super extra precautions. So we're going to take those extra precautions very seriously as much as we can. But Rabbi Yehuda says you don't need the doors. The oxen themselves are enough. But how's the ox a tent? If you're on top, the tumah should go through the ox and nail the kids. Okay, that's the Gemara's question. Sthira. So the Gemara answers, Ki asa Rav Dimi. When Rav Dimi came, whenever you have the Gemara Ki asa, is because this Gemara is in Bavel. It's Talmud Bavli. We also know there were Ameroim and people in Eretz Yisrael, which is called Talmud Yerushalmi. Why it's called Yerushalmi is a question. It's really Talmud Eretz Yisrael. But for some reason, and they weren't even based in Yerushalayim, they're based in actually other parts of Eretz Yisrael. But Lamaitz is called Talmud Yerushalmi. Very often, Ameroim would travel from Eretz Yisrael to Bavel, over in Bavel to Eretz Yisrael, and repeat over teachings. Most Chacham were in Bavel. The center, the action, the Lakewood was in Bavel. But there were other cities, like Manchester, and there are other cities that had a lot of serious Talmidei Chachamim in Eretz Yisrael. So the Gemara is saying that when Rav Dimi came where? He came to Bavel. Amr Rabbi Elazar, he said the name of Rabbi Elazar, Moida Rabbi Yehuda Kimloi Egrei. Rabbi Yehuda agrees, Kimloi means as big as an egref. The words are as big as a fist. Kimloi, like the full fist, as big as a fist. Rabbi Yehuda agrees that if the oil, even if it's naturally made, it's still going to be an oil as long as it's the size of a fist. And when we say a fist, we don't mean my fist, which is pretty much a tefach. We mean the fist of a guy named Ben Avatiach. He's brought down other areas in Shas. Ben Avatiach was a huge guy, big muscle man, and the size of his fist was the size of your head. Okay, that was how big it was, the size of a regular person's head. If it's the size of a person's head, that is already an oil. That's a tent. So just to chazir this again, Rabbi Yehuda holds, to really be an oil, you have to make it into an oil. You have to make it. It can't just be a random hole with a roof on top and boom, you have your tent. It has to be you made it. But Rabbi Yehuda says if it's so large that it's already the size of a head, then that has a din of an oil, even if it wasn't man-made. So when you're on these oxen, there's a serious amount of space between the ox and the floor. Right? It's definitely the size of a head. So therefore, it would have a din of an oil, even though it wasn't man-made.
Why wouldn't it have any din of oil?
Why?
Even though it's That ox might not be man-made, but neither is a tree. You make a tree. The person who brought the ox over here,
Right.
it is man-made, because I brought the
But it
ox
wasn't
over
made
here.
with intent. I mean, it's an
It
animal.
is man-made intent. They're getting on the ox and beating out the
We're going to see the Gemara, but they actually go on the ox. They don't use the ox as a shelter, pashas. The ox is never used for underneath, on top. But it's not meant to be a tent.
Yeah, it is.
Yehuda says they go on top of the ox, and it just came here, and no one's having intention for that. So if Yehuda holds, it should not.
You don't hold that is. You are using it for an idol. It doesn't hold. You don't need a door because you have an idol. You are using it as an idol.
But it wasn't man-made. It wasn't man-made. So the Gemara's question still stays.
A tree, you put it there.
A tree wouldn't either be unless a person cut the tree and put it
I
there.
understand. So the ox is only here because I put it here. Why is it
I hear.
man-made?
Okay, I hear it. He's saying you brought the ox there. Okay, fine. We could discuss it after, but as of now, he seems to be saying that a shar. It's a good question. He seems to be saying, and by the way, you're onto something, because the more is going to have a shock of Atari about this, and you might be right about something. So you're a little bit step out of the game. But Rabbi Yehuda agrees that if a tent's already a substantial amount of airspace, it gets a din of a tent. So therefore, when the kids go on these oxen, you do have enough space that's officially an oil, and they'll be protected on top from any tumah below.
It's the same review as our Mishnah? That says that.
We haven't even, it is the same Tana, we haven't even gotten back to our original Mishnah in Sukka. But we had a Rabbi Yehuda in a Mishnah in always, and Rabbi Yehuda in a Mishnah in Para. Those were a steer, we just answered the steer.
How does that fit with the Makar of Rabbi Yehuda that he learns it from Xer Shava?
What do you mean?
Makar of Rabbi Yehuda that has to be the Yada.
Yeah.
From Xer Shava.
Has to have kavanah, right.
So,
Where does he get this from? It sounds like an overall svara, that in order to be a tent, official tent, and not random, you have to try to do it. But once it really is a substantial amount of airspace, then it gets the din of a tent even without your kavanah, which means to get something to be a small hole and say, this is a tent, so you have to put kavanah into it.
Was a Xer Shava.
True, but the Xer Shava was about a case for like that were not like big airspaces. But once it's a big airspace, it becomes a tent even without that intention. That's what he says. And the Gemara proves it. Tofnan Hay stands for Tanya Nami Hachi. The Gemara brings a proof. Tanya Nami Hachi says also in the Brisa, Umoide Rabbi Yehuda b'shkifin uvenekike asloim. Rabbi Yehuda agrees by shkifin. Shkifin mean boulders that get detached from a mountain. A boulder flies out of a mountain, and the kike asloim mean like crevices in the rocks. When there's real holes in mountains, a boulder all of a sudden gets dislodged. So there's a massive amount of like space inside the mountain with a roof on top, or there's a opening, a cleft in the rock where you could live in there. It's a substantial cave. You go in. Rabbi Yehuda agrees that all those have a din of oil for sure, because they're a huge amount of airspace. Like the tree that we were just talking about. If it's a huge airspace, even Rabbi Yehuda is going to agree that's a tent. So you have a clear brisa that Rabbi Yehuda agrees to this idea that when there's a lot of space, it is a tent. So we took care of our stira. We haven't gotten back to our Mishnah and Sukkah, but the Gemara has another kasha. Says the Gemara, V'haredeles deyesh bakame greifin. We know the door. There's a lot of fists, ben avatiach fists. This big guy, but it means like heads, size of heads. There's a lot of fists between the floor up until the door itself. Vikatani, and the Brisa says, Rabbi Yehuda Aimer, lo yimavin dulasis ela shvarim. Rabbi Yehuda says they would not bring doors, rather they should bring oxen. What's the Gemara asking? It's not the Gemara is asking like this. You're coming out now, according to Rabbi Yehuda, that when there's a substantial amount of airspace, anything's an oil, as long as there's a lot of agrafin. So I understand something. When it came to the kids being on the doors, and the Rabbi Yehuda said, don't use doors, use the oxen. Why not use the doors? Obviously, Rabbi Yehuda seems to hold that just the airspace alone is not enough. And he holds any weird type of tent is not a tent. So putting a door on top of an ox is not a tent. It's not a tent because it's such a weird type of contraption. He holds a tent has to be like you put major effort into it. It makes sense. But here, you're just putting a contraption of a door on top of an ox. So Rabbi Yehuda, it doesn't seem to be a tent. Rabbi Yehuda seems to hold this is not a tent. The Araya, he says, don't use the door. He says, don't use the door, rather use the oxen. Something's wrong with Rabbi Yehuda's Shita. He says, don't use the door, use the oxen. What does Rabbi Yehuda hold? The first question is, what does Rabbi Yehuda hold? His whole thing is a stira. If he holds that once you have enough airspace, then it is considered an oil, so then use the doors. What's wrong with the door? And if he holds it's not, then why shvar any better? He's like a contradiction in his own shita itself. We know there's a lot of agroifin between the floor and the shar and the door. So why would he say, don't use the door, use the shar? If the door is good, then the shar is good. And if the door is not good, the shar shouldn't either be good. Rabbi Yehuda's shita does not seem to make sense based on our calculations.
So you can't use the door?
We just came out, according to Rabbi Yehuda, that to be a tent, it has to be that you made a tent on purpose. If it's a small hole, if it's a very big hole, then any type of tent is a tent. So Rabbi Yehuda's opinion now, let's look at the beis. Rabbi Yehuda says, when it came to the kids, don't put a door on top of the ox, just use an ox. Why? If he holds...
You don't need to use the door.
Oh, that's the Gemara's going to answer. That's the Gemara's going to answer. Very good. The Gemara answers, when you learn the Gemara so clearly, also the questions don't make any sense. But suppose his words right now are, don't use the doors, use the ox. The man of shach. Either way, either the door is good, then the ox should be good. If the door is not good, the ox should either be good. That's the Gemara's kasha. So the Gemara answers, Amar Abaya, exactly your answer. This is what he meant to say. Don't need to bring the doors. The ox is big enough. What we're scared a kid's going to stick his hand off the ox? These are little kids. The oxen are they're heavy, they're thick. The kid's going to stand on top. He's going to be scared. He's sitting there. He's not going to put his hand out. So therefore, you don't need the doors. That's all Rabbi Yehuda says. But of course, we could still stick with Rabbi Yehuda's opinion that any hollow airspace that's a sizable amount is going to be an oil regardless. That's one teretz. Rava says, no. Lo yivivian delasis kol ikr. He actually says, don't even bring the doors. I don't even want you to bring the doors. Why not? The words are, lo yivivian delasis kol ikr, which means they should not bring the doors kol ikr at all. Like, I don't want you to bring the doors. Shemipnei, because shedaita shel tinek gasa love, the tinek's mind's going to be, gasa really means like coarse, but it means familiar, relaxed. It means, the word gasa, fishy means coarse, but coarse means you're relaxed, you're easygoing about something. When the kid's on top of the door, his mind's going to be relaxed. Shema yetzi roishay echad me'evarev v'yitame. We're scared. He's like, it's such a wide space, a door on the ox. He's probably sitting there relaxed. He's going to stick his hand out for fun. While he's just on the ox, he's going to be scared. He's going to try to stay on as much as possible. When he's on the door, he's going to be like, hey, this is fun. Let me try to stick my hand out. And because of that, we turn the page, he'll become tamei b'kever atayim. He will become tamei from the safek tumah, the kever of the deep. So that's why. Tu pshat and Rabbi Yehuda says, don't bring the doors. Either he meant you don't need to bring the doors, just rely on the shar being an oil. It's totally fine. Now, why is a shar a good oil? Because there's a big hollow airspace between the shar and the floor, and that's a tent. So if you're on top, you're going to be free from tumah. Second answer is from Rava that no, don't bring the doors. It's actually a negative because the kids are going to get so comfortable that they'll stick their hands out. Hey, look at this! I'll stick my hand out and become tamei. Rather, just have the shar and they'll be scared and hold on tight to the shar and not stick their hand out. We'll stop over here.